Hi, welcome to Conversations. My name is John LaRue. I'm the Manager of Collections and Exhibitions here at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery, and this is episode 3. And we're really proud to have Gerald Beaulieu here speaking to us about a wonderful sculptor visiting us from Prince Edward Island. But before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that the land that we're on now is the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq people here of New Brunswick, and it's an honor to be here on the banks of the Wolastoq and St. John River in New Brunswick, in this beautiful land. As I mentioned, we're here with Gerald Beaulieu, who is no stranger to certainly Frederictonians and certainly patrons of the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. For the last year and a half, we've had the privilege of seeing this wonderful sculpture called Where the Rubber Meets the Road. And this is one of a pair of large crows, amazing anthropomorphic sculptures, these sort of giant crows made out of reused rubber tires. And Gerald is a sculptor. I've always had enormous respect for Gerald because I think he's really the preeminent sculptor of Eastern Canada. He works in numerous materials, whether it's wood, steel, plaster, rubber, metal, copper, so many things. So before we received this, which is now part of the permanent collection here at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery, a few years ago Gerald did a sculpture at the side of the St. John River called High Watermark, which a lot of people may know as the large copper-covered wooden poles, which actually measure the flood marks, and hopefully we don't have to use it that often in the future. But one of the most sort of varied and sort of pluralistic sculptors, certainly that I know and have my pleasure to work with. So Gerald, really a pleasure to have you here, and it's an honor to be here on either side of your sculpture, where the rubber meets the road.
I appreciate the invitation to have this conversation.
So we're on the back of, on either side of the wing of this bird, which actually has a name. This is Cooper. Cooper was one half of...
No, this is Kelly, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kelly. Get this wrong. There were two tires. There was Kelly and Cooper, both in honor of the famous tire names. And Kelly is one of a pair of large sculptures that we had here for about a year and a half. This came here as part of the McCain Atlantic Art Exhibition in 2020. And then, in 2019. And then over the winter it stayed, and we now purchased it as part of our permanent collection. And it's an honor to have here because beyond being a main piece that actually really fills our sculpture courtyard, it draws people in like nothing we've ever had outside before. And I remember you one time even told me, don't worry if kids kind of play on it, it's made out of recycled tires, it can handle it. It's probably one of the toughest things we have. Right?
Yeah, I've always, as a sculptor, because I work with materials and the materiality of things, I was always like kind of put off by the no touch of, you know, art galleries and artworks. And for a long time, most of my stuff has been very touchable and tactile. And I'll always remember the experience of the National Gallery. There's an Anish Kapoor thing where you had these stone carvings with these interior spaces carved and covered in indigo ink.
And powder, and you just couldn't.
Powder.
Yeah.
Everybody put their hand in, and of course you withdrew it, and you had these ink stains on your finger. And the best part of the show was this long white corridor leaving that display in which everybody rubbed their fingers on, trying to get the ink off. So watching people touch it, and you know, they're drawn to it, and that's to me, that's been as much a part of my work now for the past 2 decades as the visual aspect.
And yeah, and the tactile, because I know with this, I mean, the fact that rubber tires, you know, they'll last for probably a century. It's one of those things outside that it's so ubiquitous that they're out there. Usually they're detritus, they're thrown away, they're headaches. But in this, you've taken something that was thrown away. These are reused, thrown away tires, and you've made the sculpture on it. I know that when we had the discussion when it first came here, that so much of this work is about life, rebirth, you know, things dying, coming back to life, which is really poignant because you have this idea of almost of roadkill, of a dead bird, which when you look at it actually still feels alive. It still has this spirit on so many levels of work about life and death and reuse and things coming back. Tell us about the genesis of this work.
For the last probably 2 decades, I've been dealing with flora and fauna, and when you deal with flora, of course, you're dealing with plants, and we don't quite see them as alive as we do, you know, animated animals and that. And I've been very careful when dealing with fauna. A lot of it, you know, you have to deal with death because that's part of the process. So I wanted to do don't want something that's gross or kind of, you know, goes in that direction, but also don't not want to deny that reality. So this was a way to, not in a sanitized way, but in a way that acknowledged their existence as wild animals that coexist with us and, you know, are part of our landscape to the point that we often forget that they're wild and that they're not domesticated things and that they live these very, you know, they live their own lives in coexistence with our own society to the point where they now feed off the detritus of our, you know, our commuting and our transportation, and then sometimes become victims as well of that whole process.
So that's right. So the fact that tires actually kill many of these birds, but this is made of the very things that sometimes kill them.
Yeah, and then they feed off the things that also get killed on the side of the road. They're the ones that scavenge and clean up our roadkill to a large extent because they are scavengers, they're opportunists, and so they do this thing that we probably find disgusting and gross, and then occasionally they fall victim to the very same process.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why I think when this is outside, like anything, it gathers the odd leaf or pebble or so on, but it actually, unlike some of those untouchable Anish Kapoor sculptures that need to be absolutely pure, this actually seems to feel right. Not that we don't want to keep it clean, but it doesn't take away from it. It's sort of part of the world, right? It's part of the landscape. And I think that's something quite remarkable about the sculpture, that it can still work. With this, I mean, it is sort of anthropomorphically almost a perfect replica of a crow. I mean, for everything from the feathers, the tail, the feet, which are actually made of mountain bike tires to get that thinness, the eye, which is sort of a sport ball painted, but it's when you look at it, it's a bird. You suspend your disbelief. And how much did you work with a study of an actual bird? I mean, it obviously was central to your commission. There's nothing stylized about this.
Yeah, I had a couple of wings that I collected from roadkill, so that I'd taken off and, you know, treated with formaldehyde so they didn't rot and that. But mostly I was going off of photographs of roadkill, just to see what kind of distortions happened when the process happened, the process of decay, and how that
so you worked with a
affected it.
roadkill bird. I mean, it is sort of roadkill. That's what you started from, as opposed to alive.
I started with roadkill, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And because that was the idea, was that you know, this was going to be roadkill. It was going to deal very directly with the death, but then it was just, but then I had to go through a process of discovering what could a tire do. How are they made? How are they put together? I knew there's steel belts in there. What tools do I use to cut it up? How do I manipulate it? How far can I push it? And then still maintain the engineering and the integrity. And then with the construction process, like even internally, I like the fact that it's all tires in there.
Yeah, the inside, we had to move one and take the head apart, and we look in, it's a series of tires.
It's a series of tires,
yeah.
so it's finding the right size of tires, and it's lawn tractor tires, motorcycle tires, heavy equipment tires, bike tires. So wherever I could get some to get those sizes and forms that I wanted, and then because I'm replicating feathers. Then you have the challenge of you have to start at the tail and work your way up to the head because it's like shingling a roof. So you have to start at the bottom.
Oh, of course. You did these ones first and then work your way up.
And you work your way up the body.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is a bit nerve-wracking because when you do an animal, the focus will be on the face. We're just anthropologically attuned to that. So getting the proportions right, and that's just where the experience as a sculptor comes in. There's a point where you stop doing the math and the engineering and you just become an artist and just do it and trust your instincts and allow it to go, even on a scale like this.
So you would have been more calculated at these and careful. By the end, you just had it. You could just go by the time you were at the head.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this was the second. I did that one first because it was a little simpler in the form and a little less material. And this one, I have more of a fetal position. There's a curl to the body going that way in opposition to the outstretched wing.
Yeah, this one had this sort of contrapposto, this almost kind of Michelangelo sort of thing going on, whereas Cooper was a bit more sort of tubular and interesting, but I guess less. It didn't take up the space quite as wildly, which is why I love this one so much. It really holds the space here without being oppressive. It's there. The title, Where the Rubber Meets the Road, where did you come up with that? I mean, it has that, it's sort of, it's almost kind of jokingly, but it's also real as well. It's
Yeah,
rubber
I like the fact it can read as both. It can read as a bit of a kind of cheekish comment on it, but it's also, in terms of dealing with the environment, that's where we're at right now. We're dealing with a climate emergency. We're dealing with, reduced populations of so many species that, we're at a point where we have to actually make some decisions and face some hard facts. So
this year's telling us especially, we're water's burning and temperatures are rising.
well, look what's happening out west, and then even with the pandemic, that's facing nature head on, and the fact that you just don't get to deny it. You can't spin it anymore. It actually has to be faced. So
with this, one of the things is you've reused the materials as well. So you get something that otherwise is, an environmental catastrophe. Are the mounds of tires that are everywhere. You can't burn them. You leave them. They're petrochemical on so many levels. But to use tires to make something of beauty, did you always know you want to make this out of tires? You have an environmental reuse of the material.
Yeah, I've been using materials that are very carbon-based, like tar, and rubber is carbon-based, and because it's part of that carbon cycle. And so I was looking at the possibilities. So tires were on my list.
Mm-hmm. Okay, like the corn you did here a few years ago, those were covered in tar.
They were covered in
right?
tar. Yeah. So that's from the carbon. They're black. This is black because of carbon, and also aware of the fact that these were basically free. I remember I was writing my
there's
funding.
$8 worth of screws in this.
Exactly. I was writing my funding grant. It was for the first time in my life. I had no experience, materials to expend. So I'm trying to justify asking for money when people were just giving this to me. And originally I went to the dump, but then I found out that the tire shops were just as happy for me to take it away, and I would just go there on the weekends and pick through their big bins of tires that were fresh off of cars, and I could get matching sizes and matching patterns, and I could pick and choose.
So you carefully pick these tires out?
These are carefully curated tires.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Oh, see the crow. We have the cousin. The cousins are talking to us.
And people also don't realize, like, this wing alone has something like 60 tires in it, because some got rejected, and there's so much overlay that you just don't realize quite the volume that's there. Like, for each one of these feathers, you only see like half or even a third of the actual material. The rest is buried in behind.
Buried, absolutely. Well, I mean, you use the metaphor of a shingle roof. You only see a third of the shingles. 2/3 of it are the other layers that are underneath. So that same kind of idea here. One of the things which seems a little, I don't want to say comical, but when we first showed this, it's next to this enormous stone wall at the Beaverbrook. It's almost as if it sort of hit the wall and came down and landed. So it actually still has a relationship which is quite solid to the building, which, as opposed to just an object placed in white wall, it actually has this kind of narrative which is here. Is that important to you, and that your pieces really fit with the site and have this connection, this narrative, this dialogue with its setting?
Yeah, I think so. And more I've been doing work that is outside, because it just allows certain freedoms you can't get within a gallery setting, and you can do different materials, different processes that wouldn't necessarily be safe or meet, occupational health things and that. So, but the relationship to the site is always, that's always important.
Do you hear there's a crow talking to us all the time here?
Yeah.
That's perfect. He's like, talk about the crow. When this was placed here, part of it was due to almost necessity, because the McCain exhibition, which was unfortunately cut short by the pandemic, there actually wasn't really the space to fit this inside. So it was a sort of happy accident. We thought, well, let's put it out in the sculpture court, which was really designed for pieces like this. But it was an amazing opportunity, because it allowed us to have sort of a semi-permanent outdoor sculpture which could speak to people walking by, and it's the park's full of kids, and the wonder that people would have to come and see this was unbelievable. And it was one of the few times where, again, you said we encouraged kids to come on and to have this actual, not just a physical but a real emotional relationship with a piece of artwork, and you could see the joy that people had with this. So where do you kind of hit that line between wanting people to have a pleasurable, sort of happy experience with a piece of art versus understanding the real sort of dark or deep or really serious message that this is trying to say? Or is it something where they can have both? I mean, sort of pleasure versus pain. Where do you see that with the work?
I always see it kind of, it does both. Like, and I'll be honest, like I usually come at a piece from a certain perspective. I have certain idea it's around, but I find the most successful works I do, somebody will come up to me, they'll tell me how it relates to them on some personal level that I never even considered. And I think, okay, if it's done that, then it's done its job. If it's made that connections, and it's not it's not up to me to decide how people want to connect to it. You know, because I don't know what people's experiences are. I don't know what their relationships are. I remember when the Watermark piece down at the riverfront was unveiled, there was somebody who was quite upset about that piece because it reminded him of his home being destroyed. You know, it got flooded, so it was he had a very emotional response to it, and it's not up, you know, it's not my job to decide how they respond. You know, that's the viewer. Any response is a valid response usually.
No, absolutely. A good friend of mine down the street that I grew up with, actually, she had a pet raven that she nursed back to health with a broken wing, and I just remember. So I've got quite a strong relationship with these birds that, you know, they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere. But I think to have something, it's something we always also consider that they're sort of out there somewhere. So to be able to touch one, you feel like you really are touching something which is living. Why do you think that is? When you look at the face of this, it's seen as a dead bird, but it feels alive. Why do you think we feel that? Do you think it's just because it's done so well, or is it because we want this to be alive?
We probably naturally want life to be alive. You know, I don't think people are comfortable dealing with death, the finality of it. We spend probably a lifetime trying to avoid it, and for good reason. You know, that's not the outcome most people want. So yeah, I think that's just, you know, a natural part of being human. You know.
This has been shown before it came here. Tell us, it's been on the road a little bit. So again, where the rubber met the road. This has had tires taken across Eastern Canada. Did this start in Charlottetown?
Yeah, I think the thing I'm pleased about with this piece is that from the day it was finished, it's never been in storage. Mm-hmm. It's always been on view, doing what art is supposed to do, be viewed by people. And I think that's my attraction to doing works outside now, is that, you know, they have the opportunity to be out there a little longer than, say, traditional rotations in gallery collections and that. So this was originally done for Art in the Open in 2018, so it was displayed on Victoria Park with the idea that people could drive over this wing with their vehicles. This wing. I even had police permission to do so.
Don't come and do that here, folks. But.
And it was going to be a performance just for an hour, just allow for it to be real roadkill. But Islanders were too polite and too scared to drive over. They didn't want to do it. They all took big wide circles around it, and it's like the only people who did it are people who knew I wanted a photo op. And, you know, so 5 cars, like, you know, obliged and drove over it. And so it was on display there. That was only for that's a one-night Nuit Blanche style exhibit. And then from there it went to the Confederation Center of the Arts, where it was on view for about 1.5 years.
Okay.
And then from there it moved to here.
So I had no idea, really. You got them to drive, I assume, like sort of from here out when they were driving.
On this chunk here, yeah.
Okay.
They drove over it, and that one hadn't curled up yet because, of course, these things, I didn't know how they perform over time, so it's been interesting to see what it does.
Okay, so this one. So when you did it, were these actually a little bit flatter and they're sort of rolling up, or this one?
More like this, and then some had curled up over time in that, and it's just, there's steel inside it. Troy was asking about it.
Yeah, that they're steel belted.
Steel belted. But what happened is I took a grinder to it, and it heated up the steel, which expanded it, and then it shrunk back into the rubber and kind of disappeared very conveniently.
Funny, because I think that the curvature, this one, I love this because it's cliche, but it's flat and curved at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think there's something about this. I mean, that really feels. It feels like waves. Or there's something just. I don't know. Even like. That feels sort of different about this, just as a surface, and even just the subtle differences of the forms on these. I mean, I just really love formally how this works, almost as an abstract kind of composition of just layers.
Yeah,
you know,
and
it's
even
amazing.
Getting in with a camera, taking detailed pictures of it, even when you can't read it as a crow, it just creates this. It's really an interesting study in textures, and I love the fact that just like these patterns are all the same but different.
Yeah.
And I've never
yeah.
understood why they come up with thousands of tire patterns.
Yeah, why this and not that? Versus
Yeah,
that, yeah.
and they change all the time. And there's whether it's just for sales or whether there's actually engineering behind it, or.
Yeah, you know, it really is great. And this one, I mean, this is just genius to use this for that sort of form. It worked. Was that just out of necessity, or did it just occur to you, geez, I can actually use that?
As I just
to hide
chopped them
under.
up, I could just see what I could do with them and things like that. And then the beak was actually the hardest part, because this is a heavy machinery tire from a loader that really had no tread at all. And this is the back, and I was able to fold it over and get this to work the way I wanted.
Okay.
So it was just like, there was a lot of just playing with it, and the thing is, you could afford to play with it, because if you cut up a tire and it didn't work, you had like 200 more that I could grab. I could just
another tire.
toss it and reuse it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even this with the eyelids, I mean, it's just perfect. It just really works well. And the bicycle tires, the mountain bike tires for this, you know, did that occur to you right away? You knew that was a way to handle?
Yeah, I knew that's the way I wanted to do the feet, was to get some really knobby bike tires and then go over the metal, and then the cable ties were just another simple solution. They were black, they were simple, avoided having to work with any time-consuming process, because I was able to use all mechanical fasteners, and with just being able to screw this together, you could reposition everything.
Of course, just move it.
You didn't like the way that feather sat, and you wanted to turn it a little bit more. You wanted one that was going, because every feather is right-handed or left-handed, because it comes from the side walls, so there's a natural arc to each one.
Okay, of course. So you make it work.
So you just make it work, and you just reposition it. And just in case you want to know, there's the name of the bird, Kelly.
Oh, yeah.
That's the tire.
And now Cooper is going.
And Cooper is now going to Port Rexton on the Bonavista Peninsula as part of the Bonavista Biennale.
Oh, excellent! Congratulations. Yeah. Okay, so Kelly's sibling is going to be in Newfoundland.
It'll be in Newfoundland.
To see that. So. Okay, excellent. Well, listen, this is great, Gerald. Look, thank you so much. It really is an honor and a pleasure to have this here. It's become really one of our quintessential pieces. You know, couldn't imagine the Beaverbrook now without it. For the the imminent future, this is going to be out here, and so I just really look forward to people enjoying it. As you say, art's meant to be in people's realm, and this will be. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, because it's been a pleasure to have it here and to get such great feedback from everybody associated with the gallery and other people I know in and around Fredericton.
Great. Okay, all right, thanks everyone so much. It's been a pleasure to have you here with us. Join us next month for another episode.
All my, yeah. If you want to just drop this, if you want to just drop that down the top of your shirt.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember that, but you know,
and then
but just going through getting like a cajillion photos, which I still have, but anyway, it's great.
Great, and you can hide that in your pocket. But actually,
Yeah.